Hi and welcome to another episode of Intercâmbio Linguístico, and today we have a very special guest. And this is going to be the first time that we have our guest here with us, and this is going to be our very first interview in English. So Kelly, welcome.
Hello, thank you.
Great to have you here.
Yes.
So let me introduce Kelly. Kelly Pennington is a teacher, trainer, and consultant who works with individuals and organizations to amplify their communication and connections through English. She learned the value of dedication and determination as her journey has taken her across continents, from the military to corporations and finally into education. Besides her degree in business management, Kelly holds a CELTA, International House CAM, which stands for Certificate
of Advanced Methodology.
Okay. Delta modules 1, 2, and 3, train the trainer, along with other international certifications. Besides running her private consultancy, she also is working as a CELTA trainer. Kelly's primary focus is business English and English for specific purposes, but is passionate about all facets of English language teaching and education, as she works with teacher training and mentorship. Wow.
A lot.
Yes. You do quite a lot.
I do. I don't sleep.
Who needs to sleep, right? Kelly, so let's start.
Sure.
You are an American, but you've been living in Americana. What are the odds? An American.
I'll tell you a fun story if you want fun stories about that.
We do want fun stories.
So you've been living in Americana for many years. So why did you decide to come to Brazil?
Love. No, truly. I met my husband when I was in the US. He lived there for about 13 years. And we started dating there. He was building houses here, and I decided to follow him. I was young and in love and adventurous, so now I'm here.
Mm-hmm. And is he from Americana originally?
He's originally from Americana, yes. His family is one of the traditional families from that region, and ironically enough, I am the Americana from Americana. And when I looked at some of the books and documents that my in-laws have, because they have a lot, because they're one of the kind of, not founding, but one of the original families that were there, my last name did pop up. So, and I do have relatives from Louisiana. So it was founded, Santa Barbara do Oeste and Americana were founded by Civil War Confederates refugees. So there actually might be a link that I followed some sort of lineage down here as well. Mm-hmm. I'm not the first Pennington to come.
So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Nice. How long? How long have you been here?
I moved in April of 2011. No, yes, April of 2011.
Okay.
A little over 12 years now.
Okay, that's nice. And your career is very interesting. You trained in the armed forces.
I did. Briefly. Yes.
Okay. Studied and worked with business management.
Yep.
And then over to teaching. So how was, navigating all these different things?
It actually wasn't as strange as people might want to think that it is. So now that I've been teaching for a while, and this is kind of my chosen career path, I don't see education as very far-fetched from doing business training and military training. Because so when you are in the classroom, you're focusing on your students and wanting them to get to some sort of objective, and you want them to do something, and you want them to progress. And that happens in business as well. So whether I'm giving them professional skills, or we're reviewing something, or we're trying to work on soft skills, hard skills, technical skills, that happens. Or whether you're loading rounds in a magazine and making sure that your gun is pointed downrange and not at anybody else. I mean, it's all practice. I think practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. And so the classroom is very, very similar to me. So transitioning from one to the other, I think my perspective, my view of it, didn't really hinder me of going into education. I just had to educate myself on how to deal with the challenges and the different nuances that happen in English. So
okay, I like your sentence. Practice
makes permanent.
Okay, I like that. I like that.
Because what you do over and over again is what you're going to be able to reproduce. And
makes all kind of sense. Yeah, brilliant.
Nobody's perfect, so practice makes permanent. That was my father. Always.
And Kelly, what challenges did you face when you started the teaching?
Oh, the first one was probably imposter syndrome. I think everybody faces that when they move into a new career. And so when I started going into the classroom, I thought that I didn't belong there. So I had to figure out how to arm myself with enough information and knowledge and be able to kind of manage that scenario. I don't like to be unprepared. I'm prepared for every situation. So I started taking teacher training courses and educating myself about the language and all of that good stuff. But I certainly did not feel that I belonged in the classroom, and I didn't really think that I was a teacher for many years. And then once I got into teaching, one of the challenges that I had that I still kind of struggle with is being a native speaker. So there's a lot of stigma of native speakers for their just causes, and we can go into the whole debate of non-native speaker and native speaker. And I'm not trying to say that was harder for me. I'm not a sympathy case, but I just knew and I recognized that this is a very divisive topic and that I was going to have to work really hard to prove that I was a professional and not just a native speaker that came down and said, yes, well, I can go into the classroom whenever I want. So kind of combating that idea was challenging. And yeah, but I feel like I more or less belong in a classroom now. More or less. I'm getting there. But it's, it's a whole career and I don't know everything yet. So I'm working on it.
Would you say that the fact that you're a native speaker of English and you felt this imposter syndrome at the beginning has to do with the fact that you felt that you had to prove yourself time and time again because you're a native speaker?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that and I'm neurotic, just me as a person. I'm a neurotic person. But yes, I think that I had to, in my perception, there was, we have these internet gurus and those people that go on social media and they say, study with me because I'm a gringo. And I'm just like, oh, it's so cringy. And it's like, well, what are you actually offering these people? So that was kind of, it was frustrating to me to see that. And I can see why non-native speakers also get frustrated because it's disingenuous and I think it's unethical. And I think a lot of the students that we have that see these things online then get persuaded by these ridiculous claims. So I'm on the side of non-native speakers. I think that there's nothing wrong with that. You just have to be a good professional. That's it. Like you have to be a good professional. I don't care where you come from. You just have to know what you're talking about. But yeah, there is a stigma. So, just I didn't want to fall into that category. I never wanted somebody to say like, oh yeah, she's the native speaker. It's like, no, I work really hard for what I do. And I think everybody should.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah, but that's the problem with generalizations, right? People make certain generalizations when comparing native speakers and non-native speakers, and you have native speakers who are qualified and native speakers that are not qualified, and you have non-native speakers who are qualified. So I think it all comes down to, how much you have invested in your career. I mean, how good a professional you are, regardless of the fact whether you're a native speaker or not. Yeah,
I think sweeping generalizations nowadays are just bad in general because we can say something and then if you don't back it up, you can say whatever you want. And especially on the internet, you can say certainly whatever you want. We see that. So you can't just put that out there and say, oh, well, I'm a native speaker or I'm a non-native speaker. I think schools and institutions are a little bit culpable too, because they do make posts looking for preferential requirements of having native speakers and things like that. So I think that that's also not a good thing. I don't think that necessarily you have to have C2 level to start teaching. I don't. I think that there is opportunities for everybody. And even if you're at a lower level of English, I do think if you're a good professional and you're continuing to work on it, there should be a spot for you. And I discussed that once with Dorothy Zimak when we were having a chat, because she's extremely qualified professional. She's been in the industry for years. She has her own publishing company. She's a teacher. She's a writer. Wonderful woman. And she was teaching English in Japan, and then she came back to the States and started working as a university professor. And she was supposed to be teaching English. And then last minute they said, well, actually, we have a Japanese class. Would you be able to take over? And she goes, my Japanese is B1 at best. It's conversational, I can get by. And the school administration, I mean, this is a big university in the US. So I was shocked. I was like, no, Dorothy, oh my God. But she said, you know, the administration was like, that's fine. They just need to learn the basics. And she really didn't feel comfortable in that situation, but she knew where she could find good resources. She knew how to educate herself. She had good teaching practices. So then it was uncomfortable, but effective. The students walked away with what they needed to walk away with, and she continued to learn as she was going through that journey too. So we need to stop making these generalizations. I think in general, it's just detrimental to everybody's at their own stage, and we have to recognize that everybody starts at a stage. Nobody comes into the teaching profession as like the university professor with 30 years experience. That doesn't happen. So we have to make some concessions and start thinking about how we talk about these things.
Yeah, so a different perspective from me, actually. It's the first time I've heard someone saying that it's the native speaker to prove something. Like, okay, I'm a good professional. Not only I speak English, but I can teach, because I come from a generation, old one, by the way, that we non-native speakers had to prove ourselves all the time, you know, and whenever there was a new native speaker in town, people would go to him. And
no, there was no competition.
Right.
There was no competition at all. Like
we had this scenario in Araras so many times for people that would just pop up and, okay, I'm a native speaker, come study English with me. But they wouldn't necessarily be teachers. And we were like studying hours and hours and hours and trying to become better teachers. So it's
but just as we put stipulations on non-native speakers, we should put stipulations on native
I couldn't
speakers.
agree more.
Like, why do I get to just walk into the industry and do whatever I want? I was a horrible teacher in the beginning. Horrible. Oh, so bad.
Don't get me started there.
I was so bad. And I know that now because I've done the work, and I can look back and be like, oh, okay, I don't want to talk about it. But it's an important part of my journey, you know, like I had to deal with that. But non-native speakers, you have to prove that you are proficient and that you have teaching skills. Well, guess what? There's a lot of native speakers who would not be able to pass proficiency tests. So why do we automatically assume that they can walk into a classroom with their broken English and be the better choice? Shouldn't.
But in a way, I feel that they're just taking advantage of something that it's already there. Like students should be educated, because there is this belief that some people believe actually that if someone is a native speaker, that makes them a better teacher. There are many students who have this belief. They really hold this belief, as wrong as it is.
Yeah, but that's going to be like a really hard thing to do, to educate the masses before educating or evaluating institutions. So I think it comes from teachers, and it certainly comes from teachers demanding that institutions put better criteria and they talk about the stipulations a little bit more, what you should be able to do as a teacher. Because going across social media and trying to educate millions of people, good luck. That's not going to happen. I mean, we can't agree on anything nowadays, so it's not going to happen. It needs to come top down, unfortunately.
Yeah. That'd be ideal, but unrealistic, right?
It's just unrealistic. I mean, people don't listen to it. The only thing that I can say that native teachers I'm going to throw a big modal verb in there, might have, is cultural references. I've worked in business, I've worked in corporate. I have that experience. I work mainly with business English students, executive level, people that work for international companies. Why would they seek me out as opposed to any of you? Because I have the experience in that industry. I know exactly what happens there. I have a business degree. I don't necessarily take postgraduate courses in English or education. I take postgraduate courses in business, technology, and things like that. So That's the only advantage, is that I've had that experience. But not all native speakers have had that. And I'm certainly not excluding non-native speakers who have had that because they've worked in international companies. Again, we have to talk about how we're describing things on job requisites. It's just not appropriate.
Kelly, still on the subject of challenges.
Oh gosh.
As a teacher trainer, what are some of the most common challenges that new teachers face when they start?
Taking on too much. New teachers are new teachers. That's exactly what they are. And so just as we harp on our teachers when they're thinking about planning their lessons and curriculums on Krashen's input hypothesis and Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, just as we do that for students, we need to do that for teachers. And it's unfair for us to say, you should know all of this. I've been in the industry for only 12 years. There's a lot of stuff I know, and there's so much that I don't. And so if my expectation is I can have a conversation with a new teacher about all the things that I've acquired over the past 12 years of experience, that's unrealistic, and that's not fair. And then these teachers think that they have to, be able to be at that level immediately. It's not going to happen. I don't care how many books you read. You can be the most educated person. There's some things that only come with experience and time. And so we have to be more realistic about what the actual challenges are that we're putting to new teachers, because it's very unfair to them. I just find it as very unfair. I don't think it's right. I've worked now, I'm kind of working with CELTA, and I'm doing teacher training and mentoring, and I've heard horror stories from the people that I work with about other mentors, other trainers, other tutors that they've had on courses, that they didn't feel like they got anything out of the course, and they shouldn't even have been there, and they should have studied to be able to take it. For example, CELTA is an initial certification. You don't have to study anything to take that course. Nothing. Here in Brazil, it happens a little bit differently because it's so expensive. And so usually teachers start doing it when they have a little bit of money because they've spent a couple of years in the area. But listen, you shouldn't have to study anything before taking an initial certification. You're a new teacher. So the fact that some of those courses are pitched to teachers that have 5-10 years experience is really unfair for the other teachers that maybe didn't have access or experience. We just have to be realistic about it. We look at students this way. Why can't we look at teachers this way? And so they feel this overwhelming pressure that they have to perform, they have to know everything. Is that really realistic for them? I don't think so.
And some of them may be still struggling with the language component, right? Not just
of course.
They're trying to come to terms with the teaching, but also with we talked about that. They're still trying to improve their own English, and at the same time they want to become better teachers.
And
So
then they
there's
have the
so
pressure of
much
social
juggle.
media because you have to market yourself. And then you also have to come up with a new methodology because that's apparently what people are doing nowadays. Sarcasm noted, because that doesn't happen very frequently. But, so they are combating all of these things and they think they have to take it all on. Like, no. Okay, so let's get your language awareness to where it needs to be able to teach the people that you want to teach. And let's also make sure that you have foundational teaching practices, skills, all of those good things. And then we can move on from there and build upon that. But the fact that they walk into courses, initial courses or anything, training, mentorship, and the bar is set high. I was such a bad teacher in the beginning. So I was real bad. I had no idea. And so I think back to myself, those first 5 years, would I be able to handle any of this? If I think to myself that version of Kelly would not be able to handle it, I'm not going to give it to them. I'm going to scale it back a little bit. It's just unfair.
Yeah. And so you took the CELTA, you took the Delta.
I did.
And you mentioned a few times you were not the best of teachers when
Oh
you.
God, horrible, horrible.
And the question is, along these lines, how do you think these courses, especially the CELTA and the Delta, improved your teaching skills to become what you are now?
Yes.
Great teacher.
I'm still not a great teacher. Still not, I would not classify myself as that. I'm a work in progress, but taking those courses made me realize what I want to become and what I never want to become. And so I think that was the more important lesson for me, was that I saw some things of how new teachers or inexperienced teachers, or people who are trying to come into the industry are put in situations where the demand is so high. And then I was like, I never want to be that person. I always want to make it very, very welcoming for my students, for anybody that I'm working with. I want to make sure that it's pitched to the right level. They feel comfortable coming in. They feel comfortable asking questions. If I don't have the answer, that they know that I'm going to find it, or I'm going to find someone or something or a reference, or I'm going to find it for you, because I certainly don't have all the answers. But that's kind of the biggest thing, is like knowing that I never want my students or anybody that I work with to have the feeling of, I have a meeting with Kelly. That's the worst feeling ever. It's like this obligation to go there. I want everybody to be excited and be like, oh, I get to talk to Kelly today. Even though I stir the pot a lot and I might, push you and but I think that's good.
Nice.
And still talking about CELTA and Delta, and you are a CELTA tutor today, right?
Yes.
What are the benefits that you can see in the real life for students when they decide to take the CELTA and Delta course?
Well, they're internationally recognized certificates. So the first thing is that if you want to travel around, if you want to, kind of open these new doors and new opportunities, then certainly go off, and people will recognize that you at least have the initial or the secondary qualifications. Some schools and institutions, the money, you get a little boost in your salary, which is nice, right? So there's monetary compensation there. But mostly you're going to get out of those courses what you put into them. There's a lot of people that walk around with CELTAs and Deltas that the only thing that they got is a piece of paper. And I think it's Penny Orr that said you can have 20 years of teaching experience or 1 year 20 times, or something along those lines. Paraphrasing, because I can't speak as eloquently as her. And so if you go into a course and training and you want to improve your professional skills, and you end up just trying to check the boxes and just get through it so you can get the piece of paper, is that really what you're doing it for? That's fine. I mean, if that's what you want to do, but I just don't see that as very beneficial. So if you put the work in and you listen to your tutors and you talk to people and you network with the peers that you're working with that, are going to help you out and develop professional relationships, then you can get a lot out of it. Lifelong friends, support system, a huge resources of, shared information and all of that good stuff. But it really depends on what you put into it. So of course there's like job opportunities and money, and you will improve your knowledge. But at the same time, some people don't look at it as, I'm going to learn here and I'm going to try and figure out how to be a better professional. I just need to get this so I can get the salary increase, or I just need this certification so I can do the next thing. It's like, focus on what you're doing now. Again, it's a journey. You're at different stages. And so if you don't really focus on that stage, you're just going to end up skipping over it and not getting the most out of it.
And many teachers, when they finish the CELTA course, they are willing to start immediately the Delta course. Do you think there should be a gap so that you absorb the information better, you try to put in practice what you learned, or you think it's okay to go straight away from CELTA to the Delta?
Cambridge has their own stipulations on that. I didn't look it up. That's a good question, though. If you go onto the Cambridge website, it'll tell you that you should have a certain number of teaching hours in between the CELTA and the Delta, why. So you can actually put into practice what you learned. Those courses are intensive. And so CELTA tutors, because that's the only thing that I can speak to at this point, CELTA tutors, we're looking for people to consistently be able to put into practice frameworks, techniques, being able to do certain things consistently and effectively. But you only have 8 teaching practices. So, I mean, how realistic is that? Do you get the foundations? Absolutely. But, you know, teaching 8 hours, well, actually it's 6 hours. Teaching 6 hours is not really evidence that you know what you're doing. So that's why Cambridge says you should have space in between. I've seen people go from CELTA and 6 months later start taking the Delta and they struggle.
Mm-hmm.
They stress, they struggle. And I don't know how beneficial it is for them. I can't speak to their experience, but I don't think it's very beneficial because you haven't even tested it out. You haven't distilled your teaching philosophy yet. You haven't really come to terms with all of the concepts. And then you're just going on to the next thing. The year will pass, whether you do Delta or not, but if you make it meaningful, it would be much better.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there should be something in between. Time, other courses, exploration, something along those lines. I don't think you should just jump right into it.
Mm-hmm.
You can if you want to. I just don't know how much you're going to get out of it.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
Mm-hmm.
So since when you started, 12 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How has the field of language teaching changed over the years, and what trends do you see in the future?
Okay. I'm very ill-equipped to answer. How has it changed? I've been in the field for 12 years, so I don't think that I can speak to that. But what I can speak to is the behaviors and things that I've seen in the past 12 years. Unfortunately, I don't know, maybe fortunately for these people, we have this almost worship of certain high-profile names or figures in ELT. And it's this weird cult following behind these people. And I'm not trying to say that, oh, you shouldn't follow them. No, they've contributed, and a lot of the things that they've given to the field of ELT has been incredible. You know, coming from the studies of phonology, I think that's your field. We can see how much we actually know about phonology now compared to 30, 40 years ago. It's incredible. Corpus linguistics, you know, things like that. We know so much more about these things. But if we start following people as if they're gods, and some of them, you know, they're amazing contributors, but if we start following these people as if they're gods, I wonder if we're not being critical of everything and having these blanket, well, if this person says it, then it aligns with all my teaching beliefs, so it must be true and it must be the best way. And I'm not sure if that's really true. So I think that, you know, nowadays we start seeing people just accepting and not being critical and not playing devil's advocate and saying, well, what's that based on? And we have, you know, different sources. We've got neuroscience and mind, brain, and education coming into it. We've got linguistics and social linguistics and cognitive linguistics. We have all of these things. And then we have people that are actually teaching. And I think it needs to be a discussion amongst people starting to happen where people are starting to say, well, where did you get that study? And is it just in that context for those specific conditions that this has happened and we've extrapolated this idea and now we're putting it into practice and thinking that it's a new technique or methodology or the best way of learning? Nobody knows how anybody learns yet, as far as I know. If that happens, you know, just let me know if we figure out how we learn. So I don't think that that's necessarily a good trend. I think that people are now starting to become more educated in seeing other things in other fields and questioning things. And I think that's quite a good thing. So hopefully it starts to go more in that direction where there's collaboration amongst many different areas and many different studies and groups. I'm hoping that we just don't say, this person is famous, so whatever they say is wonderful.
Especially when it comes to EOT, right? To find like a definitive answer, because when you read research, you have like might be, could be, it suggests that. So there's a lot of hedging.
Of course, because they don't know how it works yet. And so like that's the trend that I see that this is happening, that especially when I work with new teachers now, right? And so this is kind of what they're new, and then they see these names repeated over and over, and you have to read these people because these are the seminal books. Yes, absolutely. And these people have contributed immense amounts of knowledge to the field. However, things change day to day, and we should be critical of it. And if it's not true now, but it was true back then, but we have a better vantage point because we have more information, then we should be having a discussion of, well, how can this actually translate into teaching practice in my physical reality? What does that turn into? So I have a friend, Evan Friendo. He's the guy with Business English, and I talked to him one day. And I was like, I had to use your book all the time when I was doing my Delta, because my module 3 was for business English. And I was like, Evan, I'm so sick of seeing your name. I'm like, I'm tired of it. Like, I want somebody else. You know, there's Nick Brieger and there's a lot of people in Business English, but the seminal books were from Evan. And he was like, oh God, you're still using that? and that's what kind of got me on this. This was a year and a half ago. And I was like, yeah, why? He goes, oh, I would change so many things in that book. This comes from one of the guy who he is the guy, you know, of Business English. And I was like, well, what would you change? What am I doing wrong here? Because I'm citing you and basing my evidence on your beliefs from 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 15 years ago. Is that wrong? He goes, well, we know a little bit more now. Let me point you into the right direction. I was like, oh, see, that's what happens. I still love him.
Himself.
Coming from the God of Business English himself. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, if he questions it, then maybe I should too. And maybe my peers should as well.
Nice.
Apparently, the more we study, the less certain we are of stuff. I mean,
of course.
Yeah.
And that's why we need to keep digging and studying and looking for things.
Of course. Yeah.
Incredible.
I mean, we get pretty tunnel vision. Like, we have tunnel vision because that's your specialty, but then you can always try and, you know, dabble in other things. Be like, because I find that if we only have tunnel vision, we only follow these people and we never question anything, and we never say, well, how up to date is this research? And is there anything that has kind of played the devil's advocate or gone contrary to this? If we don't do that, we live in echo chambers. And in education, I don't think that's a good thing at all. Somebody just saying, yes, everything you're doing is perfect. Keep going, keep doing. I feel very uncomfortable when people are they praise too much. Please tell me what I'm doing wrong.
Yep.
And when it comes to business field, what you have to take into account is something you mentioned at the beginning of our interview, the cultural aspect. And those guys, they don't have access to all the cultures in the world. No. So they just make generalizations, and you have to take into account our reality from where we are, right?
Absolutely. There's a lot of well, I know Evan now, after, you know, having some meetings with him, and he and Virginia and Katrina and Helen Haga, who is here in Brazil, they have, and Lucas, they have this group called Conversations in Belf. So they talk about English as a business lingua franca. And they have these meetings once a month. And it's so interesting because Evan works primarily now. I don't know if this is still true. Who knows, you know, teaching contracts and consulting and all that stuff that changes daily. He works in maritime English. And Lucas is in a university based in Hong Kong, if I'm not wrong. So he's working with the Asian markets. And Helen is here in Brazil. And Katrina is in Germany. So it's like we've got all of these, and every perspective is very, very different because culture plays a huge factor into it.
It does.
So it's blanket statements I think are just a little dangerous. So going forward, my hope is that people would kind of take the blanket statement, look at the information, but also with a critical eye.
Good. Okay, to wrap up, because, you know, Saturday, it's,
yes.
it's lunchtime.
Are you getting hungry?
I'm feeling hungry. So we have to finish this right now.
That's it. Get out. Okay.
Time to go. We started this project to try and motivate people to look for, you know, more information, question the basis, you know.
Love it.
Yeah,
100% supporting of this project. I love it.
Everything you're saying is very much in line with our you know, core values here. So what advice would you give teachers who want to improve their teaching or want to start thinking about improving their teaching and their career prospects? So what would you say to these people?
Improving your I'll kind of do it two-tier. Improving your teaching, find what you're really bad at and lean in. Figure out what you are terrible at. And in the beginning, you're going to be terrible at a lot of things. I know I was. I was like, oh God, I can't do anything. But I just kind of picked one and went with it. I'm terrible with phonology, actually. I'm really bad at it. I don't really like it so much. It's very intimidating for me. And so that's something that I've purposely, every time there's something, I'm like, no, okay, there has to be an input session. I'll do it, because it forces me to investigate. It forces me to get more information, because I know that it's one of the things that I unconsciously, even I swear, unconsciously I avoid it. So yeah, find something that you're really bad at and lean into it. So I think a lot of people say, oh, find what you're good at and just you focus on that. And I think we should do the opposite. Because if I'm good at it, like, I'm all right. I can kind of manage and muddle through. Professionally speaking, I'm old school. So professionalism. I think that is kind of lacking nowadays. For example, if you say you're going to do something, do it. Be on time. I mean, these are really, really easy things. Be open to criticism. Be able to have conversations with peers. Be able to take direction, even if you may or may not agree with it, if you're working for an institution. So I think professionalism is going to get you pretty far. Soft skills, those types of things. Because hard skills we can teach, you can learn. But soft skills, how you act, how you present yourself, and how you are as a professional, that'll go a long way. Because I would much rather hire a teacher that shows up on time, knows what they have to do, is open to having conversations and actually developing, than someone who doesn't do those types of things. So I think professionalism will actually take you a lot farther than any specific skill of, oh, I know this really well, or specialty.
Good. All right. Kelly, thank you very much. That was great to have you.
It was super fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.